I head up our data infrastructure team here at Bytes, and I have the task of hosting this afternoon's webinar. So unfortunately, and obviously, we didn't get out to Barcelona this year to experience VMworld. We understand we host customers every year that we all have a great time. We love it for various reasons, but instead it was an online event, which is great, but also difficult to kind of sit through days and hours of presentations to really kind of onboard that and take in all that content. So what we've decided to do is summarize that into a much shorter call where we'll give you some highlights and go into some details and some kind of key outputs. And then for anything you want to really dive into and have a more detailed follow-up, then absolutely that can be arranged with Bytes. Let's say my name is Matt Compton. I'm joined by Tobias from VMware and also Mike, who heads up our VMware business and practice within Bytes. Looking at the highlights, one of those key highlights was one of the big keynotes that they had. I'm not sure if you look through the agenda. Unfortunately, we did try and get him for today's event. He is a little bit expensive, and then they've gone for the cheaper option, which was myself being free. But the A-lister Will Smith, who did present at VMworld, is not on today's call. So I just want to call that out now, even though it was a highlight. We did try, but apologies for that. Just kind of give you a bit of an overview and agenda. We're on the Zoom platform, so if you want to turn your camera, feel free. If not, fully understand. We will have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the call, but if you've got any questions as we kind of go through the content, do pop them in the chat and we'll try and monitor that. If it's relevant, we'll do those questions on the fly. If not, there is some time associated at the end where we will cover that. It's fully recorded. If you do need to jump off for any kind of P1s or anything urgent, that's fine, it's recorded, and also we'll share that with you if you want to then share that with any colleagues at the end of the session. My job was just to kind of set the scene and say hello. So I've done that, I feel. I'll pass on to Tobias. I'll then be back on the end with Mike where we kind of wrap things up, feedback form, Q&A, and kind of next action. So thank you for joining, and Tobias, I'll stop sharing my screen and then you can pick it up from there.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, let's get this screen up and running. Brilliant. So thank you for the introduction, Matt, really appreciate it. So hi everyone, my name's Tobias and I am a senior technologist at VMware in our modern apps and management group, VMware. So thank you very much for attending this webinar today. So today I'm going to be spending about 45 minutes with you, introducing you all to something which actually got quite a lot of airtime at VMworld. So today I'm going to be talking about the VMware cloud operating model. Okay, so let's just take a look at what I'm going to be covering. So firstly, before going into this cloud operating model concept itself, I wanted to just take a step back and spend a little bit of time really explaining the need for a cloud operating model. What's the point in it, and what challenges is it going to help you solve? Then I'm going to talk about the cloud operating model from a couple of other perspectives, right? So firstly, really with a focus of thinking about the end consumers of technology, which could be the product teams as the consumers in your organization, or potentially developers, and then the providers or central IT as it typically is, right? And so the relationship between those two sides and the providers who need to make these things available for those consumers. Okay, then I'm going to start to build out a little bit of a virtual whiteboard with you in the next section, which really looks to explain how we might start to implement a cloud operating model, leveraging some of the VMware cloud management technology. And we'll start to get a little bit further into the technology itself. Then finally, I'd like to share with you some success from various customers. So we've got some really great reference customers who are getting a lot of tangible business value from this that I'd like to show. And yeah, just as we go through, please feel free to ask questions. I'm going to keep things at a relatively high level, and I'm not going to go into product detail too much. But if there are specific questions around that, please don't hesitate, and I'm happy to go into some of that detail as needed. I want to make sure that this is valuable for everybody. Okay, sound good? Right, let's get into it. So let's start by thinking about, the situation as it is today in the marketplace with regards to cloud. Okay. So before cloud, or cloud aside, businesses have to innovate to stay alive. Okay, I think we all know that, right? And this innovation requires, but also drives the use of technology and technological innovation. Okay, so as an example, if you look at the pharmaceutical or healthcare verticals over the last year, really heavy use of technology, right? Lots of new apps being created, even things like leveraging machine learning to develop some of the COVID vaccines, right? Or retail was, a big one. So if you previously relied on just bricks and mortar stores, you had to really either quickly adopt technology, or it's very likely you're going to go out of business in the next kind of year and a half. So significant impact. Beyond this, the next generation of applications is here now. Okay, so cloud native principles, containers and Kubernetes, microservices-based architectures for applications. These are all starting to redefine how applications and services are built, how they're run, and how they're managed. Okay. There are more modern apps being developed all the time too. Okay, so you can see on this slide here, some of the research says, it's going to be another 20% increase in modern apps being developed. And then there's also, more applications in general being deployed into clouds as well, with a 26% increase, as you can see on that. VMware's Tanzu portfolio, you might have heard with, is really focused on this space to help deliver and run quality code quickly. That's really, really strong in this area. But as you can imagine, that's really only one part of the story. So I'd like to tell a little bit further and get into the broader sense of things. So all of this digital transformation and application transformation, as we know, is driving not just cloud transformation, but a multi-cloud transformation in quite a big way. And Forrester are actually predicting another 30% increase in cloud usage just for this year alone. And it's not surprising, right? So, there's fantastic services available to consume instantly from the clouds, and so many different types of clouds now, from the hyperscalers with AWS and Azure to, competitive offerings from Google, IBM, Oracle, Alibaba. Then you also have sovereign clouds to maybe consider, telco clouds perhaps, edge to think about too now. And so in this space of clouds and cloud infrastructure, the innovation is completely relentless at this point. And of course, what's not on this slide as we start to build it out is any quote unquote legacy technology too, okay, which isn't a small thing for a lot of enterprises I work with, right? So the legacy stuff is still there because you still need it to keep running the business. So it's massively important, and that takes up a lot of your time too, maintaining that. But these cloud services from these different clouds are really helping businesses with digital transformation across the market, but only if they get it right, which, as we've seen over the last few years, can be quite hard actually. Often you'll have lots of different technologies with these different clouds, different tool sets being used to manage different clouds, often different teams operating them. You might have a distributed workforce. You might have distributed apps across these clouds. You've got infrastructure in all sorts of different corners of the globe, right? Different cost models perhaps for these clouds as well. So you can see it starts to get quite complicated to deal with as you move into multi-cloud. And technologies from VMware, such as VMware Cloud on AWS or Azure VMware Service, these are technologies that are there and are really helping with this piece through a consistent infrastructure, which will layer across all of these clouds along the bottom and allow you to run VMware workloads natively in those clouds. Okay. But as you can see, this is only, again, one part of the story. And the complexity of all of these different applications being developed, being migrated, being deployed into all of these different clouds starts to make it impossible to actually support any kind of business transformation. Okay. And so why is that? Well, agility here is the imperative. Okay, so agility as far as I can tell, is the most important thing to businesses today. In fact, I remember Panima, our GM of the business group I work in, she was on one of her recent webinars, she was talking about, you know, how throughout the last year, it wasn't the biggest or strongest businesses that survived, but in quite a Darwinian way, it was the most agile, the most able to adapt, the ones who, you know, can move quickly and pivot to different ways of doing business. You know, if you have too many manually restrictive processes, that could mean that it might take a business weeks to deliver a new service to their consumers and start getting revenue from it. But then their competitor might be doing a bit more automation or have adopted cloud in a different way, and they might get there first, okay? And so speed and agility in this space is so, so important. But unfortunately, often what we see is central IT inside of enterprises is seen as being slow often. And so you can see the stat on the slide here, showing that it can actually take, you know, more than 7 years to refactor and migrate 100 apps into the cloud, okay? And so that's not very agile. So we have to think about different ways of doing it. Then we have cost, okay? And so these fragmented and complex ways of running individual clouds and individual endpoints and data centers also starts to make visibility quite challenging, okay? And if you can't see what you're delivering or what you're running, you'll end up throwing extra resources at it to make sure that nothing fails, okay? To give you that extra bit of confidence. And so that really leads to more over-provisioning of various cloud infrastructure and services. Clearly, that's going to lead to spiraling costs, okay? So, and there's also this study from Gartner here that mentions it will take $1 million US to move 1,000 workloads from one cloud to another. So controlling costs becomes really, really important at this kind of scale and as you start to adopt multi-cloud. And then the third issue that we really see is risk, right? Okay, and so because of all of this complexity that I've just been describing, you end up with a lot of fragility across the environments. Okay? And so, you know, the power of cloud is very powerful and can give you, you know, 4,000 different knobs for 1,000 different services, which is great, but not knowing which combination of knobs to turn and levers to pull starts to leave you exposed, right? So it's going to be impossible to do things like, you know, apply security policies across these different clouds and endpoints. And starting to get all of this under control and governed and safe really needs an army of people at this point to deal with all these different technologies. So agility, cost, and risk, from my perspective, these are the value drivers for business, right? So these are what move business towards your goals and towards your outcomes, right? So in summary, really, we have to make sure that we help fix these problems if we want people to be successful, if we want cloud adoption to be successful. But firstly, and this is an interesting one, I think, and something that I've been talking about for many years as I've worked in the cloud space. So firstly, I think we should all agree that to be agile, to be innovative, and to really move forward, all software needs to run on some sort of cloud, whether that's a private cloud, whether that's a hybrid cloud, whether that's a native cloud of some kind, whatever it is. It needs to run on a cloud, because if it doesn't, what you're doing is you're running around looking at a lot of discrete infrastructure, whether that's software-defined infrastructure or not, spending a lot of time on those specific discrete parts, when actually the focus should be on innovating, right? And so that's what cloud is for me. It's about being able to innovate, get rid of some of those challenges. But this slide is kind of about taking a little step back for a second and a look at, you know, what a cloud is defined as, and where really this concept of the cloud operating model originally comes from. So this definition here that you can see is the 2009 official definition of cloud computing. And really what that did was it explained the characteristics required for something to be considered cloud computing, as you can see on the slide. And so it says it needs to provide, you know, on-demand self-service access to a pool of resources that can be provisioned and released with minimal effort. Okay. And so if you need to request a service from IT, and then someone has to raise a ticket, and then someone goes into vSphere and they clone a bunch of VMs, and then they send it to another team for the network to be connected up, and then to another team for the application to be installed, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't necessarily considered cloud computing, right? This is virtual infrastructure, and a lot of people tends to be. And unfortunately, a lot of businesses are in this position, which is really what's led us to this point. But anyway, these attributes that were defined in 2009 really implied a new operating model for IT, a new way of doing IT, a different way. And this is the cloud operating model of doing IT. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's kind of move forward. And really that's today what we're talking about. So we can work with customers alongside with Bytes to help you adopt a cloud operating model with VMware. Okay. And so this model is really there to maximize the value realization of your cloud transformation and also your application transformation. So since we all agree, hopefully, that software needs to run on a cloud, we're going to need to transform any existing infrastructure to behave like a cloud. Okay, so to get those things like self-service, resource pooling, metering to measure how much is being consumed. And that 2009 definition of cloud is true now as it was then, but there's more to it now. Okay, and especially with the advent of multi-cloud, we now have to not just provide those attributes for one cloud, for one thing, but we have to provide those attributes of things like self-service, etc., across multiple clouds too. So we need to embrace the power of all of those different clouds. But both things need to happen, is how we've seen it and how we've seen it progress, right? Because if you leave your on-prem infrastructure in a kind of an unoptimized way, you're not going to move the organization forward, which is what we encourage everybody to do. So try and move the organization forward, the people, the skill sets, by training everybody to run and consume from clouds, okay? Which is why we would always suggest you build clouds new or you transform infrastructure, and you also extend into new clouds or public clouds, native clouds. Moving on, wait for my slides to catch up. So the cloud operating model is an industry term, and it's used by many organizations. It's not just from VMware. And it's really there to define how people, process, and technology are aligned to the business, to the application, and also to the cloud strategies, and to bind those things together. And so you might have seen some different approaches to implementing a cloud operating model. I'd encourage you to Google it as well. So you'll see, for example, consulting companies will really focus on the people and process, and there'll be kind of long engagements to talk about transforming org structures and things like that, which is one way of doing it. The difference is at VMware, we really lead with our transformational technology, which is our strength, right? But that has to go hand in hand with people and process conversations, as you'll see as we go through the rest of this deck. Okay, just going to have a quick look in the chat. Okay, there we go. We're looking all right. So feel free to throw questions in the chat or into the Q&A as we go. So as we start to transition into this cloud operating model, we're really talking about, to start with, we're talking about on-premises or hybrid clouds, or, a hybrid cloud with a part on-prem piece. And so then one of the approaches that we're going to have to take is to move from this traditional siloed approach, as you'll see on the slide here, into a cloud operating model. Okay, and so really IT are going to need to adopt an operating model that's in line with the world of public clouds we talked about. So in this transition, it's about moving from, as you can see here, manual delivery of resources into an automated delivery directly to line of business or whoever your consumers are, application owners, developers, whoever it might be. And these consumers should be able to consume any type of service from any type of cloud, either from the edge, from a private VMware cloud, from a public AWS native cloud, from a VMware cloud running in Azure, potentially with Azure VMware service or something like that, multi-cloud, whatever it is. So IT should be able to deliver those quickly in an automated way and still be in control of, security, compliance, and costs. Okay. And so our technology and our approach to the cloud operating model enables this through 3 areas. Okay, and so those 3 areas are service delivery, operations, and governance. And so service delivery, operations, and governance, as you can see here. So these are the pillars that we work with our customers on to develop competency in, to really make all of this stuff work in the real world in a tangible way. So starting with service delivery, it's about acceleration. Okay, so this pillar focuses on speed. It's helping our customers to remove anything in the way which might be slowing them down. We want to unlock the power of all of these clouds, the amazing things you can get from them. We want to be able to rapidly set up these environments, set up policies, set up security groups. We want to be able to, really unlock application innovation as we're going through this by doing things like maybe creating guardrails in place so that developers can get access to what they need to without process getting in the way. So restrict maybe what they can use so that they can use it as much as they like without any issues. It's about that speed piece. When we work with customers in this competency in particular, what we often see is the increased automation starts to lead to a change in process and a change in skill sets. And we start to go from, typically seeing a VMware admin team focused on things like vSphere, and they might adopt some of the automation technology. And then we'll go back in a year later, and actually now that's transformed into more of a DevOps team, where things are being checked into Git, code's getting pushed through pipelines, and it really allows you to leapfrog and start stepping forward through those things as you go. Then we have operations. Okay, so operations is about optimizing as much as possible. So if we think about the product teams that need to be there to get the services out there faster to customers, but the IT people need to make sure that it all stays consistent and it all stays available. And actually what we tend to see is through some of the added tooling, some of the extra visibility that you'd get through this, we start to see SRE teams born out of improved operations. And so SRE teams will do things like, if something fails once, they'll go fix it. If it fails twice, they won't fix it, but they'll automate a fix to it. So having that extra time, that means then you can start to move forward and innovate further. So operations is really about that piece. And then governance or control. Right? So we start to have this higher order of control that we need to provide across the entire estate when we move to multi-cloud. Okay, so across the entire business, across distribution chain, all functions of business. And so here it's about delivering a framework to ensure that everybody's accountable for what they run and for what they consume with enough clarity so they understand what they're running and what they consume. Often as part of this piece, the governance and control piece, we start to see Cloud Center of Excellence teams set up. And these are really teams that are tasked with the responsibility of developing that framework for the business's cloud operations as a whole. So this goes further away from the applications and the VMs themselves into how do we manage these clouds as a whole. So service delivery, operations, and governance. And let's have a look at those in a little bit more detail. So here you can see that the slide says enable application developers and support DevOps processes, and that all sounds very fancy and great, but what does it really mean? Well, any product teams or developers or DevOps teams, whoever the people are that are creating services for your customers, these people have a lot to think about in a multi-cloud world, more than ever. Okay, and so they're going to be much more responsible, and they're going to care much more about how these services run in production now. For example, if you start to move to DevOps and your developers and your operations teams are starting to kind of merge with the responsibility, there's no fence to throw things over anymore. So, before it might have been that the developers would write some code, they think this is okay, I've tested it in my environment, throw it over, now it's for IT to deal with, they care about it, I'm going to go on and deliver something else. Actually now, because they're more combined as one team, they create the code, but they also want to make sure that it's running well. Okay? And, and the providers of the IT or cloud platforms, typically central IT, they need to make sure that the product teams have everything that they need to be able to build, run, and manage services effectively, cost effectively as well these days. So we work with our customers, here to deliver this modern developer platform, okay, with all of the cloud APIs you would expect, along with things like infrastructure as code, CI/CD pipelines, templated and quickly deployable infrastructure stacks to test on. That kind of thing can be really, really powerful for a developer. It's about making sure that it's all there, ready to go, and it's also straightforward for the consumers to use. So, this world of infrastructure is relatively new for a lot of the consumers. And so we don't want to hold back any of that good development work or the services being delivered to move you forward as a business. We don't want to hold any of that back, since they're essentially what's surfaced to your customers. And then we have operations. Okay. And so this is about, I think of this as a performance per pound kind of thing, a performance per dollar, as we say in the US workloads. So it's about optimizing performance and cost. So again, the developers in this scenario really care about their code running as well as possible in production. And the providers, central IT, they need to give the developers access to see if their app is performing well, for example, something as simple as that. Or if its cost in a particular cloud is more expected, or is more, is more than expected, things like that. And so we can do some really straightforward things here. We can help with some things to start with, like we might come in and help you to automatically right-size some of your on-premises workloads. And, we can often see a significant CapEx saving on the amount of servers being used, for example. And that's something that VMware is very, very proud of and very strong with. But that right sizing piece is only really like a one-time or an occasional thing, maybe. What we want to do as part of this competency is ensure that performance, capacity, cost, that these things are right first time, but also that they stay that way as well. And so there's, again, lots of things that we can do to help with that. But one example might be by giving the developers or giving line of business, whoever your consumer is, giving them an in-context version of what you might see as IT operations as a whole. So for example, as an IT team, you might be looking at some amazing monitoring platform like vRealize Operations, for example, or whatever monitoring platform you use, to see the health of the entire database estate, right? So you might be looking at that as IT, and that's great. But what we also want to start doing is providing API access to this technology too, so that a developer or DevOps teams can programmatically check that the resources being used for their specific database are okay, in context to what they're doing. And then they can adjust it themselves, potentially, if it's over provisioned, maybe. So these types of things are going to make sure that the services that run on the platforms stay efficient, stay optimized, but it also, as you can see, it starts to optimize the way that the teams work together as well. And then finally, governance. Okay, so again, there are different sides to this from a people and a process perspective. So here, what we might do is start off with something like our cloud health technology. Okay. And if we think about working in a multi-cloud environment, you'll have lots and lots of different bills from different cloud providers, potentially, from different endpoints, different accounts that you have, different responsibilities and different levels of service that you have from these different clouds. And so with Cloud Health, we can come in and very, very quickly look at the cloud bill. So it plugs into the billing APIs, just as a kind of like a read-only thing to start with. And using this way of doing it, we can look at what reserved instances are being used. And we can say, actually, those reserved instances are reserved too large. You don't need to be paying this much for those. You can actually half the size of it or whatever. And so we do right sizing for upfront payments as well now, so that you can actually start to save on your public cloud bills. And actually, typically, we're seeing that our customers save somewhere in the 20 to 30% range typically, which I think is amazing for cloud bills. We could, however, though, provide this in context view for developers too. right? So that they can see how much their services are costing to run in various clouds. Okay, so it might be some interesting way of allowing them to do some of the cost reduction for you. And then on the compliance side, this is important here as well. So it's not just about investments, but also compliance and security. And again, as VMware, lots of different ways that we can help. But as an example, we might use something like a VMware secure state. And that will check that everything that's running in your various different clouds conforms to your best practices, to your specific policies as a business, and maybe cloud best practices or your best practice from AWS. Maybe there might be a particular firewall rule that you need, or a port that needs to be closed, and it always has to stay closed for you to be, to get your certification from the auditors. Maybe we can check continually that the environment stays that way, and we remediate if it goes outside of it. Okay. So it's all about optimizing those investments and mitigating any risks in an automated way through this governance competency. So those are really the three competencies at a high level. Any questions on that so far? Let's take a second. Okay, no problem. So next, I'd like to start really showing you how the VMware Cloud Operating Model might be implemented, and talk a little bit further about the technology and what that might do as part of it as well. We'll build this one out at the top. So first off, as we start working with customers, we'll start to want to understand your application or your service modernization strategy, whether that's something like the 5 R's based here. And you see there's lots of different ways that you can approach application modernization, and you can retain things as they are, you can rehost them and put them somewhere else, you can replatform them, you can refactor and try and change it so that it's more cloud native. You can potentially retire it and just consume something directly from the cloud. We want to try to understand all of those different things. And we'll talk about containers and microservices based architectures, commercial off-the-shelf applications, SaaS applications you might be using, any migration considerations as you start to go into this world of multi-cloud. And here it's really important to understand where any complexities or bottlenecks might be. Okay, and then we move on to the clouds. Okay, so this is the native public clouds to start with. So we'll look at which clouds you're using and for which purpose. There's going to be different purposes for every cloud, and you might have chosen clouds based on commercial reasons. You might have based it on a particular service or analytics that a particular cloud does. And so we want to try and understand all of those types of things and understand where those complexities might be, whether that's a private strategy, a hybrid strategy, public, edge, multi-cloud, however that happens to be, because there's lots of different ways of doing things. If we look at the native cloud space, for example, with we have AWS or Azure as the kind of hyperscalers, there's a set of APIs that you get with an AWS or an Azure that are available to use from day one or day zero, right? And this is really what consumers are looking for today. I remember working with one of our large global banking customers before they'd actually moved into this model and before they'd started adopting cloud management. Their CTO at the time was really determined to push any new technology directly into AWS. And this made a lot of sense. They wanted to move into AWS. They had a cloud-first strategy. And so he really worked for a long time on surfacing those AWS APIs up to the different business units in the bank. There's a lot of them, as a developer leveraging AWS, for example, you'll have, it's not an exhaustive list, but you'll have an IaaS API, a PaaS API, performance API, a cost API, security API, it goes on. And you can use those to get what you need really, really quickly. And these APIs are what anybody with a credit card and an AWS account can get today. But throughout this engagement with this customer and this bank, they had a lot of strict policies and processes and compliance rules that were starting to get in the way, and they just weren't really geared up for AWS yet. This was a few years ago, and so nobody was able to consume it. It was difficult, and they really went back to raising tickets for infrastructure, and they'd not even gone down the virtualization route that deeply yet. And so there were a lot of tickets raised. Somebody goes and buys a physical box, and then they start consuming from it. And it was really slowing them down. And so we worked with them through this concept of the cloud operating model and explained to them that we can actually provide the same level of flexibility and speed with those APIs for IaaS, for PaaS, for security, cost, and performance. But then we explained that, you know, we can provide that not just for that one single cloud, but actually it's for the private cloud and extends into native public clouds too, or even VMware-based clouds. And so something like a VMware Cloud Foundation, as some of you might have heard of, this is really giving you the infrastructure components you need to build the cloud on premises. And then with vRealize on the top, we can start to convert any of those VMware-based clouds into a public cloud experience and extend that into native public cloud too, for really a true set of multi-cloud APIs that can be consumed. And you know, it goes beyond the APIs too. You can actually start building policy and intention into the platform, right? So, you know, for example, you could use something like vRealize automation to blueprint up a service. And let's say, for example, it's a traditional 3-tier app, web app and DB, right? And so you can start to blueprint the VMs and the containers, the shape, the size, the color. You can start to describe the networking between them. You know, maybe they might need an on-demand load balancer for the web traffic to scale. You know, they might need some ports restricted maybe. But you can also start to go into the guest as well as part of this blueprint. So you can have the instructions on how to deploy the software, that's Apache or a database or whatever. And so that's really great, right? And so that's something that, you know, we've been doing for a long time, creating these blueprintable infrastructure stacks. And that's a big part of the vRealize automation technology and the customers that we have using it. However, over the last couple of years, we've really extended that, okay? And so now we make those blueprints completely cloud agnostic. So one of those blueprints you can create for a service, for a product, for whatever it happens to be that you need to deploy, and we can make that deployable onto any cloud. Okay, so that's really, really powerful, something we're very proud of. And you know, essentially that might be part of your cloud operating model that you start to build. Here we go. Click through this one. Then we have our Tanzu Kubernetes build platform. Okay, and so here we're going to look at providing you with a consistent Kubernetes runtime with things like containers as a service. We'll provide multi-cloud Kubernetes management so that you can retain visibility and control over your platform as your Kubernetes footprint grows, if that's the route that you tend to go down. And this also includes things like platform observability with, you know, access to distributed tracing across the apps to monitor them more deeply, histograms, and you know, that kind of platform is at cloud scale and exceeds something like 1 million data points per second. So some really powerful technologies you can use to observe the platform and make sure that everything keeps running. And then, you know, managing across those clouds, and I touched on this a little bit before, but so we really have vRealize and Cloud Health. Those are our two cloud management brands. And so with vRealize, we're there to provide the consumption layer for VMware clouds, okay? So enabling that public cloud experience in your data center and across hybrid clouds, right? And as I was mentioning before, this platform is going to give you the same level of self-service, IaaS, performance, cost, and security APIs that your developers or your consumers of the technology have started to become used to and have started to expect from a cloud. And you know, just to reiterate one final time, we extend those capabilities into native public clouds too, creating that multi-cloud API surface for not just your VMware clouds, but all of your clouds, actually. And then we have Cloud Health. Okay, so Cloud Health really being the final piece of the puzzle here. So in a multi-cloud environment, businesses have a higher order of management and governance across clouds to think about too. And this goes beyond the kind of the infrastructure or the VMs or the services. It's at a higher level kind of thinking, I suppose. So Cloud Health is really there to enable a simplified financial management, okay, for visibility into cloud costs. And it's going to allow you to optimize resource and cost allocation and utilization, and also implement governance policies so that you can start to automate any daily operations. So this is the way that things should be. If it goes outside of it, automatically remediate. And so with these guardrails, you can start to provide a level of control over the consumption of cloud services from a cost perspective, a compliance perspective, and a security perspective too. With Cloud Health Secure State, or VMware Secure State as it's now known, that's going to do the same thing with security and compliance. So it'll plug into your different clouds and will allow you to see what's out of policy based on your rules, enabling you to prioritize any violations, visualize the context of how that's come about, and report on issues, and obviously remediate any risks that you see. And so it thereby really gives you this set of capabilities around financial and performance management and operational governance with Cloud Health that developers can use and line of business can use too. And it's worth saying that this is all without disintermediating the clouds or getting in the way of any of these clouds. We really want to help our customers move into a multi-cloud environment. We don't want to get in the way of that. And so often what we've seen with technologies over the years is you've got a cloud, you want to keep it under control. So you put this thing in front of it and you have to go through this thing, and that keeps it in control. But then clearly people just go around it anyway. So we want to be able to make sure that everybody can use all of the tools that they use, that they can use all the clouds that they use without being a bottleneck, but still be able to provide management across those environments and provide value from a cost perspective and from a governance perspective. Hopefully that makes sense. And then, clearly, as you can see, this is all wrapped up with the concept of the cloud operating model. So I'm coming towards the end of my slot now. So what I wanted to do was really share with you a couple of customer success stories. So all of these that you can see on here, these have referenceable use case studies behind. They're all publicly available. Happy to share the links as well. But some highlights from my perspective, from some of the things we've been doing recently. So Provident, Mexico, you can see on there, they were able to reduce their monthly operating costs by 60%. GfK on there, you can see they were able to massively scale their footprint whilst simplifying the estate, as we talked about, and improving time to market. Then we have, AAA Holdings, you can see on there, they were able to get hybrid cloud deployed and working in 6 months with all of those visibility and automation benefits that we talked about. 6 months, quite an achievement. Then we have, this is an interesting, so I really like this one. So Bosch Stuttgart, this is a financial services company in Germany. And VMware has been working with them and helped them to optimize and streamline their hybrid cloud operations. And this has had an impact of up to 10 hours of IT time per month, 10 hours per month, redirected from IT operations into innovation. And so I'm sure anybody would be thrilled with 10 hours a month back to work on innovation. I think that's quite amazing. From a governance perspective, we actually manage $13 billion of public cloud spend with Cloud Health by VMware. That's actually 20% of AWS usage globally. So we're the absolute leader in this field. And lots of customers getting a lot of benefit from this. I'm thinking of an example of Experian, one of our customers in the UK, credit reporting company, if you're not aware. And by helping them really to govern their cloud services and leveraging technology like Cloud Health, we were able to help them with savings of $90,000 per month. And that's adding up to over $1 million of savings per year in the public cloud. So as you can see, some very tangible and valuable business benefits there. And, this is something we've been doing for a long time as VMware. We are the trusted leader in this industry for automation and cloud management as a whole, various different areas. Trusted leader from IDC, from a market share perspective. We've got Forrester, the leader in the Forrester way, and Omdia Universe as well. So this is something that you can be confident in. This isn't, some brand new technology that's just been released. This has been an iteration and a growth over many years, and something that we're really proud of. I'm going to leave this final slide up there. So there's a link there that you can use to some extra technology. I'll go through some Q&A in a minute, but there's some additional cloud operating model content here to review, which I'm happy to share. We even have a cloud operating model for dummies guide that I've been helping the team work on. We've got some good white papers and a few videos, which I'd encourage you to check out. We also have the sessions from VMware. Okay. So thank you very much for the engagement today. I've enjoyed talking with you. Let's have a look at any Q&A that might come through. So, okay, so we've got a couple of questions. So is it a product that we can buy? So the VMware Cloud Operating Model isn't a product as such, actually. So it's more of an approach. So there's absolutely technology which underpins it, but we can think of it as a way of working or as a way of moving towards cloud adoption and cloud transformation. So sometimes I actually think of it as a similar concept to DevOps in a lot of ways. Right? So with DevOps, you have a tool chain, but it's actually defined by how dev and ops share a responsibility and collaborate further to improve the life cycle of an application. And for the cloud operating model, there's also a tool chain, but it's also about how you approach cloud and multi-cloud as a whole. And so we have lots of prescriptive views of how to do that through our learnings over the years. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay, and is it appropriate for every business? So do they need to be a specific size? It's a great question as well. So this is going to be appropriate for any business considering multi-cloud, and it's flexible. Clearly, there are going to be differences in approach, but there needs to be an approach to simplify this in some way or another. And in smaller companies, the time that you get back becomes even more important. So yes, I think it's appropriate. It's just finding the quick wins to go after, and then those long-term tangible benefits as well. Yes. Okay. Any further questions from anyone? Any ones I've missed? Okay. Well, if not, then thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking with you all. Look forward to any follow-up and any. I should hand back. Thank you. No.
Tobias, I'll pick it up from there. So thank you very much for pulling that together. If you stop, and I will just put up a screen quickly. So if there is any further questions, then pop in the box while we kind of summarize. Mike, you've got your email on there for kind of any follow-ups. Is there anything else you wanted to quickly cover?
Yeah, just a couple of bits. And yeah, thank you, Tobias. That was very informative, and thank you for sharing those customer success stories as well. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Mike Rogers. I work at Bytes as a VMware sales specialist, and just wanted to talk around quickly some new subscription offerings announced at VMworld. So in conjunction with what we've been understanding today around VMware's cloud operating model, there have been two new offerings announced. The first being vRealize Cloud Universal. Now, this is a hybrid subscription that enables you to deploy vRealize on-prem or consumer SaaS interchangeably and without having to purchase separate licenses. This is particularly ideal for hybrid deployments and can heavily assist you prepare for cloud migrations by getting you that visibility and right sizing between your deployments. And the second subscription offering announced at VMworld last month was Vcloud Suite subscription. Now, this is the subscription equivalent of Vcloud Suite, but most importantly, this marks the first time in history that vSphere is available on a subscription basis. And that comes along with the vRealize portfolio in a number of different flavors and editions. And just a note on the Vcloud Suite subscription, there's VMware currently running a promotion around this. So if there's anything that you've been hearing today that's of interest, in particular VCloud Suite subscription, VMware Cloud Universal, and the rest of the stack, then do get in touch with myself and the Bytes account team to discuss further. But yeah, thanks, Matt. That's pretty much me.
Thanks, Mike. And just to close, I see quite a few of you have filled in the polls. Just a couple of questions. I think there's 4 in total. Just helps us tweak these for futures and make sure that we're making them as relevant as possible, because obviously you're spending your time joining them. So if you don't mind, please take the 30 seconds or so to complete that. It really does help us. Mike, Tobias, thank you very much for your time today. I found it very useful myself. I'll be sharing it with the rest of the team internally. But as Mike said, if you have any further questions or there's some areas that you want to go in a bit deeper, we have the expertise, we have the skill sets, more than happy to cover off any of those areas. So pop your account manager or Mike an email and we will pick that up for you. Again, thank you for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you.